Now, WSAV Storm Team 3 on your side presents Storm Watch. Brought to you by your Touchstone Energy Cooperatives.
So far it's been quiet, but the hurricane season is far from over. Welcome to WSAV's 2018 Storm Watch, preparing for the storm. Now, the peak of hurricane season actually starts now, and it goes through the end of September. I've been the chief meteorologist of WSAV for more than a decade, and I used to say this year could be the year we get hit. But after Matthew and then Irma, I'm now saying it could happen again. And if it does, we have to be ready, because you never really know what one storm could do. City by city, destruction was left behind. Hurricane Irma was a record-breaking storm. It lasted as a hurricane from August 31st all the way to September 11th. And Irma was the first storm on record to maintain winds as strong as 185 miles per hour for 37 hours. Now, at its peak, Irma stretched 650 miles from east to west, which is bigger than the entire state of Texas. On September 6th, Hurricane Irma left a string of small Caribbean islands devastated. The eye passed over Barbuda, damaging about 95% of the buildings on the island. With the massive storm predicted to head our way, millions and millions were told to evacuate. Then, on September 10th, Irma hit southwest Florida. It completely battered the Sunshine State. It left a trail of tornadoes and produced incredible storm surge flooding. And then, we were next. Even though Irma was downgraded to a tropical storm as it pushed through Georgia, our streets turned into rivers, power lines were ripped down, and some of our coastal communities were cut off. Irma's landfall in Florida and Hurricane Harvey's in Texas make 2017 the first year on record that the U.S. has been hit by two Category 4 or stronger hurricanes in the same year. Now, for so long, our coast has dodged hurricanes, but then we got a 1-2 punch with Matthew and Irma, one known for significant wind damage, the other known for significant flooding. Meteorologist Lee Haywood now explains why they were so different.
The last 2 years brought two big storms, Matthew in 2016 and Irma in 2017. Both had significant impacts on our coast and across the coastal empire and low country. Matthew tracked along and just off our coastline back in early October 2016. The storm at the time was a borderline Category 1 and 2 and produced wind gusts up to 95 mile per hour on Tybee Island, 87 mile per hour at Hilton Head Island, and 75 mile per hour in western Chatham County at the Savannah Hilton Head International Airport. While Matthew produced considerable flooding on the coast, tree damage hit our area particularly hard. Because the storm hugged the Atlantic shore with powerful hurricane-force gusts, its winds dropped far more trees than Irma. As for Irma last year, it was a different beast. It tracked to our west and weakened to a tropical storm as it got closer. So the winds were not quite as strong, but coastal flooding with Irma in many cases was much worse than with Matthew. Repeated ocean swells moved in well out ahead of Irma, so water levels were already high. Then the strongest part of the storm came in during astronomical high tides, and combined with a sustained tropical storm onshore winds plus storm surge and a heavy amount of rain, this allowed water to pile up and overflow into the coast, marshes, and the Savannah River. So 2 years and two named storms with significant impact, Irma with water and Matthew with wind. I'm meteorologist Lee Haywood.
Hurricanes not only have names, they also have numbers, categories 1 through 5. It's a scale used to predict how much damage we could see, and it's called the Saffir-Simpson Hurricane Scale. And it all started with a scientist and an engineer back in the 1970s. All the way back 100 years ago, a devastating hurricane hit Corpus Christi, Texas. It had winds stronger than 110 miles per hour and a 16-foot storm surge. Robert Simpson was just a kid then when the storm struck his family's home. With water 6 to 8 feet high, Robert had to climb onto his father's back, and the family had to swim for 3 blocks before reaching a safe shelter. Now, while it was definitely terrifying, the storm supplied Robert with a fascination that left him with a lifelong interest in hurricanes. So he went on to become a meteorologist and eventually the director of the National Hurricane Center from 1967 to 1973. It was here where Simpson wanted to find a way to better communicate with the public. See, up until this time, meteorologists would describe a hurricane's anticipated strength by just comparing it to past storms. People didn't understand this. It didn't work. So Simpson said maybe a scale would. And the scale he found best was that of Herbert Saffer. A structural engineer, he laid out for the first time what kind of damage could be expected from an approaching hurricane by using categories. Only thing was, his scale had nothing to do with wind, so Simpson adapted it. He took Saffer's categories and added a certain range of wind speed, and that's how we got today's Saffer-Simpson hurricane scale. Now, the scale doesn't account for rainfall or storm surges, so some think we need to develop a different way to categorize hurricanes. After all, it wasn't the wind speed that made Hurricane Harvey so dangerous. It was a storm surge and 50-plus inches of rain. Weather is a very serious subject for me and the entire storm team. And for each of us, me, Kyle Dennis, Lee Haywood, and our newest meteorologist, Alyssa Carsley, there is a moment when we knew forecasting the weather was going to be our life's mission. Tonight, we're telling you what that moment was and why we feel it makes a difference in how we present the weather to you. Here is my story. Well, my story is a little weird, in my opinion. It's not your typical childhood weather story. I was really, really close to my grandpa. Growing up, they would take care of me. Dirt road down the street, would go to their house. When I was in high school, he actually had an aneurysm and he had his right leg taken off. Whenever the weather would change, storm moving in, high pressure in control, he would have what is called phantom pains. So I had a research paper that was due in high school and decided to do it on how the weather affects you physically and psychologically. I got interested, watched all the meteorologists in Birmingham, Alabama, sent them emails, asked them, how did you get into weather? And I signed up, was in school. First of all, I went to the University of Alabama. They don't have a weather program, scholarships were better, I was a Crimsonette there. Graduated on a Saturday and started graduate school at Mississippi State 2 days later. That program was a 2-year graduate program. People from all over the country coming together, but out of our group, there were only 2 females. First job, Omaha, Nebraska, far from home. Next job, Michigan, far from home. Too cold, too much snow. I wanted to get to the South, so when this position opened up, I applied. Didn't know if I'd get it, and here I am 11 years later. I love Savannah. Savannah's beautiful. The people are so nice. Our downtown area is just beautiful. The coast is gorgeous. Love the people here, and I've raised my family. I mean, when I came here, I had a toddler and I had a newborn, and this is now our home. The very heavy rain, the stronger winds, the storm surge, this is what we have been waiting for. With Matthew, I had both anxiety, I was anxious, and I was eager because we'd never done this before, so I was curious, how were we going to cover it? How good were we going to be? We did it. We were over it. And then a year later, Irma comes. We are expecting things to really get ramped up in the next couple of hours. The emotions were completely different this time, but we still gave it our all, and it was definitely a learning experience. We always say no storm is the same. They're all definitely unique, and that's what we have to take away from this. Even though we have now the experience of tracking Matthew, of Irma, Hermine, we now know no matter what storm is coming next, it is going to be different. We're going to have to give it our all and give it the exact same energy, eagerness, anxiety that we gave when Matthew first came. We come in and we do our forecast. It's like a math problem every day, a prediction. And then we get to see the next day if it's correct. First of all, that's just me because I care. I want to be right. The other part of me that cares so much is because I love people here. My family's here. I want to make sure that we do cut in when we need to and give you storm updates and predict things correctly, because sometimes it's just affecting your drive home from school or work, but it's also times when it's affecting whether or not you decide to evacuate. And when it comes to decisions like that, we need to be right. We need to be accurate. And when we aren't, instead of beating up ourselves, we need to learn from it and move on and try to use that experience the next time. We love what we do. I can tell you that every meteorologist with the Storm Team 3 group, we all love what we do, and we work well together, and we learn from each other. There's not a day, actually, that doesn't go by that I don't learn something from somebody in my team. A little later in our storm special, you'll hear from meteorologist Kyle Dennis, Lee Haywood, and our newest Storm Team 3 member, Alyssa Carsley, about what makes them passionate about weather. Stay with us. When preparing for the storm returns, we take a look at what you need in your emergency kit. Plus, changes in Chatham County for this hurricane season you need to know about. We'll be right back. When a mandatory evacuation order is issued, we all need to have a plan. The Chatham Emergency Management Agency, along with Governor Deal, has made some changes in those evacuation orders this year. News 3's Trish Williford has more.
Before Hurricane Matthew, all of our plans were simply those. They were plans. They were things that we developed with partnerships. We put them on the shelf. We exercised them every now and then. When Hurricane Matthew came along, that actually allowed us to put those plans in place. We were able to actually identify where the gaps are, where the challenges are in implementing those plans.
Chatham County Emergency Management Director Dennis Jones says leaders began working right after Matthew on an improvement plan, which included changes to evacuation zones.
During Hurricane Matthew, we had 2 evacuation zones in the county. And right after Matthew, we realized that we had some challenges with that evacuation process. So we divided up the largest evacuation zone into 2 evacuation zones. So now we have an A, B, and a C. We have 3 different evacuation zones, and that proved to be effective during Irma. So that's one of the lessons learned right after Matthew.
Following Matthew, Jones also convened a command policy group,
which is a combination of all the mayors and managers of each municipality, as well as the superintendent of the school board, the sheriff, and the chief judge. And we get those key decision makers together, and I give them the scenario, I tell them what my recommendations are, and then collectively they make a decision as to which direction the county as a whole is going to go. So during Matthew, we really didn't have that. We had some challenges with decision making during Matthew. The procedures that we followed during Matthew, honestly, a lot of them were chaotic.
Many people also had questions about another big change. Dozens of trees were cut down along Interstate 16 following Hurricane Matthew.
Matthew created quite a bit of debris, not only in Chatham County, but throughout the region. So that was one of the primary reasons why the Department of Transportation chose to start taking down trees along I-16. They wanted to make sure that we could get back to the coast, or they could get back to the coast as quickly as possible. And during Matthew, there was just so much debris over I-16. They felt it best that they mitigate that as much as possible in the future.
In Chatham County, Trish Williford, WSAV News 3.
Now is the time to make sure you have everything you need, just in case a hurricane hits our area. Get a pen and paper handy, because Storm Team 3 meteorologist Kyle Dennis is going to help you make your checklist.
Well, of course, no hurricane special would be complete without talking about a hurricane preparedness kit. We tell you about them all the time, we talk about them a lot, but a lot of people wait until the last minute when a storm's approaching, when the lines are long at the stores and supplies are flying off the shelves. Well, one WSAV viewer has a very thorough kit, and we were impressed with it. She invited us over to take a look. So, Rachel, you have a lot of stuff here in your hurricane kit. You've got stuff for if you stay, if you evacuate. Did you just buy all this stuff at once, or did you acquire it over time?
No, I think a lot of things should be household items. For example, I always have candles on hand. You never know when a power outage might happen. Sure. Batteries, things happen like that. But the biggest thing was the water situation. Anytime I would go, there would be no water, and I got smart. I went on to Amazon, got these amazing 5-gallon water box things that you can just fill up with your tap water. My evacuation stuff, if I do have to leave, everything's all set. I just grab those.
Take a look at some of this
these
stuff.
3 things. Bug out bag if you're military. I'm not, but I'm sure somebody else has a much better one. If you are evacuating down the I-16 and there's no bathroom, Travel John comes in handy, because I don't know if it's illegal, but I know where I came from, it's illegal to go to the bathroom on the side of the road, so this is a more sanitary way to dispose of that. This thing goes in your car. You can charge your phone, you can charge or set a fan up, whatever you want to do with this. And then, of course, I have my overnight bag. That actually can survive for like 2 weeks because of travel cubes. Then the dogs.
Yeah, so you have dogs, so tell us about that.
I have dogs. This bag is amazing. It's waterproof. It holds. You can never have too many Walmart, Publix, whatever bags. It actually unfolds to a larger dog bed, which I have a 50-pound mix, and then I have 3 Chihuahuas. 2 are very elderly. Those are their medicines, so I'll need that. I mean, you can get things like this from Petco. I think I got a couple of things like that from Walmart. You know, it's just looking around and specifically like, what do you really think you'll need, and you know, are you going overboard or can you survive with less? You know, I have a generator, definitely got that after Hurricane Matthew. And then I have the jump starters, a massive giant fan, because when your AC goes out, it really starts getting warm in here. I have tarps, drop cloths. I have wet vac in case water does enter my house. I have camp stoves. It's literally just, you know, how are you going to cook things, or how are you going to just be comfortable?
An important thing to remember, obviously Rachel has a ton of stuff. She's really thought of everything, but you don't have to go out and buy all of this stuff all at once. Think about maybe getting a couple of items here or there long before you hear about a forecast for an approaching storm. Everyone's needs are different. Some of the things you saw today are things maybe you don't need, but hopefully this gave you some ideas for how you can get started with your preparedness kit.
Weather is one of Kyle's biggest passions, and you're about to see it's always been that way.
46 in Savannah right now. It is 48 Richmond Hill. Rincon 42 as well as in Statesboro. So you may need a jacket or a sweatshirt just to get started this morning. I think I knew that I had a deep interest in weather when I was in probably 3rd grade. There was a monster blizzard up in Philadelphia. There was like 3 feet of snow. And I noticed there's something different about me compared to all my friends. They were all inside playing video games. I was sticking Post-it notes in the door every hour to monitor how much snow was accumulating. I was flipping back and forth from all the local stations to watch the forecast, and I kind of had an idea that there was something calling me to weather. By the time I was a senior in high school, I started doing forecasts in the morning announcements, and I would type up my forecasts every day, run off like 500 copies in the library, and hand them out in the hallway, like to my friends and to teachers. And then I wound up going to Millersville University up in Pennsylvania, a big weather school up there for meteorology. Got my first job in weather at a TV station in Iowa. My very first day on the job, working professionally as a meteorologist, I had a blizzard warning. Very first day on the job. I really missed the coast. I grew up at the coast. I've always wanted to live by the water. And not just because I'm a beach bum, but because I love to track coastal weather, whether it's just sea breeze thunderstorms in the summer, tracking hurricanes. So much weather happens at the coast, and it's always such a challenge. After 9 or 10 years working professionally as a meteorologist, the biggest storm that I've covered to date was Hurricane Matthew, hands down. You know, I've worked on the coast before. You know, I worked up in Charleston for 5 years. We had some big storms when I was there, but nothing like Matthew. And, you know, as a meteorologist and as a student meteorologist, you learn about all different types of storms. Of course, you learn about hurricanes, how they develop, the structure of the storms, what they do, what their impacts are, how to predict them. But until you actually live through one, you really, there's no replacement for the actual experience of living through it, experiencing it, seeing how strong this storm is, what track it ends up taking, and what impacts it has on storm surge, on just flooding related to rain versus the storm surge, the winds. You really need to live through it and experience it to really become a seasoned forecaster of those kinds of storms. I love downtown Savannah, the architecture, the beauty, the ambiance, the restaurants, the food. It's just fantastic. I've been doing this my whole life. Even before I got my degree in meteorology, I was studying weather. Since I got my degree, I've been doing this now for a decade. I have a decade of experience covering tornadoes, hurricanes, flash floods, winter storms, ice storms. I've covered it all. And I'm passionate about warning people because, you know, there are some great computer models and there are some great weather apps, but there is still no replacement for the experience of an actual human forecaster who knows when the models are going to be wrong, knows which model is going to be right and for what reason. I am passionate about forecasting things accurately so that people have as much notice as possible so that they can be safe.
Stay with us when Preparing for the Storm returns. We take an in-depth look at updated flood maps in the coastal Empire and Lowcountry and how they affect what type of flood insurance you may need to buy. We'll be right back. After the past few years with direct impacts from Hurricanes Matthew and Irma, the way we evacuate was updated. Depending on where you live or your zone when you leave has changed.
Before we talk about the new evacuation zones, you need to know the difference between an evacuation and a mandatory evacuation. Depending on which is issued, you will be expected to do different things.
An evacuation order is issued by SEMA when local officials feel it's in your best interest to leave the area in the path of a tropical storm or a hurricane. An evacuation order does not mean you have to leave. That decision is up to you.
If a mandatory evacuation order is issued by SEMA, then you must go. That means all residents, visitors, businesses, and anyone else must leave.
Now for the new zones in Chatham County. Evacuation Zone A is all areas east of the Truman Parkway and the Vernon River. Evacuation Zone B includes all areas west of the Truman but east of Interstate 95. And finally, Evacuation Zone C is every area west of I-95. These zones have clear boundaries that most Chatham County residents are familiar with.
Once a mandatory evacuation order is issued, all major roads are considered evacuation routes. That includes Georgia routes 204 and 21, US 80 and I-16. Remember that parts of I-16 will flow entirely in a westbound direction. These contraflow lanes are designed to get as many people out of Chatham County as quickly and safely as possible.
And here is some great advice to remember to prepare for any evacuation. Have a full tank of gas, bring medication, food, and water for everyone evacuating, and be patient. Evacuation could take a long time.
For anyone who was evacuated, we know you worry about what you'll find when you come back home. Since these storms can produce torrential rain, you may find a flood-damaged house. Are you insured? Do you need to be? WSAV's Joanne Merrigan has help now in terms of flood maps and flood insurance.
They set up a computer model using historical storm data.
New flood maps in Chatham County are the product of years of work by FEMA with the help of local authorities. The maps tell the story of sometimes changing zones.
So Omler Loop on Wilmington Island. Previously, this would have all been X zone, so you would have been outside of the special flood hazard area. But now you're going to an AE10.
Assistant Chatham County engineer Suzanne Cooler says in some cases, people who didn't need flood insurance before may now have to purchase it.
You're required to have it in any of the special flood hazard areas. So that's your A, AE, Vs.
For the most part, those affected are those with federally backed mortgages. If you do go into a high-risk flood area, you should get a notice.
And so once that happens, you're going to get contacted by the mortgage company saying your flood zone has changed. You're now in a high-risk zone. You're going to be required to have it.
Insurance agent Pat Parker says the cost of flood coverage does vary.
So it's not only what zone you're in, it's how high your first floor starts.
He says remember that homeowners insurance will not cover rising water. The only thing to repair your home in a flood is a flood insurance policy. And he says don't assume you're safe just because you are in an X zone where flood insurance isn't officially required.
The water doesn't know where to stop. The water doesn't say I'm going to stop here because it's a lower risk zone. Gravity determines where the flood waters go, especially what we've seen here locally since Irma. Some areas that flooded were in what's called a low risk flood zone.
If your zone doesn't change in terms of new mapping, remember this is a model and it's based on storm surge.
The methodology used looks just at historical storms. So they take the storms that occurred in Chatham County as of 2010, so even before Irma and Matthew, and map the likelihood that we'll get those types of storms again. They don't look at anything going forward. It does not include sea level rise. It does not include the fact that our oceans are getting warmer and so the storms are getting more intense.
So the map may not tell the entire story of your personal risk, and that's where Parker says he comes in. He says flood insurance costs less when you don't need it, so buying or keeping a policy now when it's not required could help you if your zone changes.
So they can be grandfathered in at a better rate than if they didn't have flood insurance, and then they have to have it.
Joanne Merrigan, WSAV News 3.
One note here. In some cases, it can take up to 30 days for flood insurance to go into effect. So it's best to talk to your own insurance agent. For more information about changing maps, contact your city or county floodplain administrator. Now, many of you may not know this, but in addition to being our weekend Storm Team 3 meteorologist, Lee Haywood also teaches meteorology at Georgia Southern Savannah campus. Forecasting and teaching are Lee's passions.
You know what? I've always been interested in meteorology and in weather. It really dates back to when I was a kid. I would say the one big significant event that got me interested in it was when I was 9 years old, a tornado. It came through the fields and missed our house, but then took the neighbor's roof completely off. So it was a very close call for us. Just the fact that a tornado passed through and close to my area frightened me, but also really interested me. And so from that point on, I was studying meteorology. I was reading books about it. My parents bought me a weather instrumentation kit. I would go out and take daily weather observations, temperature, humidity, pressure. I went to school at UNC Asheville. I graduated in 1998, specialized in a couple of areas, specialized in what's called synoptic meteorology, which is essentially understanding weather patterns on a large scale. For example, low pressures, high pressures, fronts, hurricanes, and such. Also specialized in what's called mesoscale meteorology and tropical meteorology. So I kind of worked, took some extra classes in tropical forecasting, which I think really does play a pretty good role here. My first job was in Mason City, Iowa. And I had fun up there. It was a cool place. We had a lot of cold weather, a lot of blizzards, saw tornadoes up there. But I had a chance to, after a year, to move on. And I looked at quite a few different places, but one place that was had a job application or job opening was Savannah. And I came down here for an interview and loved it. The news director was great and the weather team was great. And I fell in love with it when I was in town for a couple of days interviewing. And as soon as the offer came for me to join WSAV, I took advantage of it. When you combine Matthew and Irma 2 years in a row, those are probably the two biggest events that I have covered. From Matthew in 2016 with the brush along the coast and all the wind damage and some water damage. My memories of being in Statesboro and being sort of the backup to in case Savannah, our ability to broadcast out of this building ended. You know, I was ready to go up there and also did reports up there. So it was a very scary time, I think, for many folks, and for me it was probably the most memorable storm I've been through. But then Irma last year was pretty big too. I just remember the water and the significant rise of the water on River Street and at Tybee Island. So those two combined, I would have to say, are the biggest events I've covered.
Yeah, so what you do is you take the forward motion of the hurricane.
Anytime you have a passion for something, I think you want to bring that passion to others and you want to teach them about what's really cool about the weather. So I got here in 2000, and in 2001 I got the opportunity to go over to Armstrong Atlantic State University and begin to teach meteorology classes, and I was really excited. And so I've been teaching it for over 17 years now. I'm passionate about it and that I am very knowledgeable. I'm actually the longest running meteorologist in the Savannah market now with over 18 years experience straight running. You know, I think that I'm somebody who folks know. I've been here a long time. I care about giving the most accurate forecasts, the most timely forecasts, most personable forecasts, and I try to bring it home on a daily basis. And I think folks feel like that, or at least folks can depend on me to do that.
Stay with us when Preparing for the Storm returns. How the most vulnerable members of our community were able to get out during Irma and why it wasn't as easy as you might think. Plus, Puerto Rico was ravaged by Hurricane Maria. We check in to see where they are nearly 1 year later and why a local Puerto Rican family is concerned for the coming weeks. We'll be right back. Welcome back to WSAV's 2018 Hurricane Special, Preparing for the Storm. I'm Storm Team 3 Chief Meteorologist Chris Allred. Hurricane Irma triggered evacuations, with the most vulnerable people being the first to get out. Among them, premature babies at Memorial Hospital. But as News 3's Martin Staunton reports, after those babies were moved to safety, 2 infants came into the world as Irma was roaring past our region.
There were a lot of babies like this one who were in Memorial University Medical Center's neonatal intensive care unit as Savannah remained in the path of Irma.
It was a crazy time, obviously a critical time. We try to get the babies out before the general public gets the information to evacuate.
Last year we had 54 infants in the neonatal intensive care nursery, and we did evacuate all 54 successfully several days prior before the storm made land.
Hurricane rains did not stop labor pains for a pair of women in Savannah. St. Joseph Candler Hospital consolidated their campuses in preparation for the storm, moving its labor and delivery unit to St. Joe's on the south side. There were 2 babies born during the storm. It was a Savannah couple who welcomed a son into the world, and soon after, a couple from Statesboro also had a son as Irma passed through our area. These births marked a milestone for St. Joseph's campus. Those were the first in that hospital in more than 2 decades.
St. Joe's hadn't had babies born in their hospital, maybe a few in the ER accidentally, but they hadn't purposely had births at St. Joe's campus since we merged.
Connor Ellison is the second baby boy born under the storm clouds of Irma. Ronald Foxworth Jr. was the first.
The first one that delivered, she was there for the entire time with us, so they were so much fun, and of course 2 days she was the only patient we had, so she got a lot of attention, and we kind of bonded with her, and we had a really good time.
It was such a good time, Ronald Jr. quickly earned a storm-related nickname from the nurses.
They call him Armonte after the storm, Irma.
Armonte.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to stick?
So his nickname going to be Armonte.
Here at Memorial, once the storm had passed, there was a second phase to the evacuation, and that's bringing the babies back to the neonatal intensive care nurseries.
We went to Atlanta, we went to Albany, we went to Macon, we went to Augusta, so we really went kind of all over the place, about 5 or 6 different hospitals, and to get that many babies moved in that short period of time, like I said, was really an amazing feat. And then to be able to get all those babies back and transferred back here to be able to continue taking care of them was something that was very important to us and very important to the families.
And it seems very important to everyone in the Coastal Empire that the 2 biggest hospitals in the region can handle the care of the littlest patients, even through a hurricane. Reporting in Savannah, I'm Martin Staunton, WSAV News 3.
It's been nearly a year since Hurricane Maria battered Puerto Rico. It was one of the most devastating storms in recent history, and the strongest storm to make a landfall on the island in 85 years. Maria came ashore with sustained winds of 155 miles per hour, knocking out power to the entire island. Billions were spent to get power restored, and as of today, reports say everywhere on the island now has power. Right after the storm hit, a local restaurant with ties to Puerto Rico began raising money for relief efforts. News 3's Shayna Ferreira revisited them to see where they and their families are now.
Almost 1 year later, and Puerto Rico is still in recovery mode.
Puerto Rico ahora mismo se está recuperando, todavía se está recuperando, 90% de la isla, como te digo, pues ya está prácticamente estable. Sí hay sitios en las montañas que por la complejidad de poner la electricidad se ha hecho difícil.
After the Category 5 hurricane decimated the Caribbean island, thousands were left without power, without food or communication, leaving families abroad desperate to get in touch with their loved ones on the island. Puerto Rican government officials confirm more than 1,400 people died in the aftermath of the storm.
Lo que entró a Puerto Rico fue un monstruo, ¿sabes? Entró caminando, pateando todo lo que encontraba a su paso. Pues, da pena por mucha persona mayor que todavía necesita.
Juan Melendez is a native of Puerto Rico. He lives in Savannah with his wife, and together they own Puerto Rico Restaurant. Melendez says both the destruction left behind on his native island and the United States' response to it were painful to watch.
No siento que se dio la ayuda necesaria con la rapidez. Estados Unidos es un país grande que se mete en sitios y construye puentes en menos nada. Y nosotros se olvidaron que nosotros estábamos ahí.
Hundreds on the island remain without power, many still struggling to find normalcy in the place they call home.
Que la ayuda va a llegar. ¿Cuándo? O sea, ¿cuándo iba a llegar?
Melendez says his heart breaks for the destruction, but more than that, he says he feels Puerto Rico has been forgotten.
Nuestra gente va a la guerra, combate por este país. Aportamos mucho, A pesar de lo que muchas personas crean, están muy equivocados. Puerto Rico aporta mucho a la economía de este país y pues somos parte. Yo considero que somos parte de los Estados Unidos y en un momento de necesidad pues fue más lo que nosotros sentimos que nos olvidaron que lo que nos ayudaron realmente. Ahora mismo estamos en la temporada de huracanes, no se sabe qué va a pasar, hasta que esto no se acabe, no se acaba. Puerto Rico no creo que esté preparado para otro cantazo como este.
Puerto Ricans coming to terms with the loss on the island and here in the States. After the hurricane hit, hundreds of evacuees were taken by FEMA to states like Florida. Many of them concentrated in the Orlando area were placed in hotels under the Transitional Sheltering Assistance Program.
Hay mucha gente viviendo en hoteles que ahora, no sé si ustedes saben, en agosto esa ayuda se acaba. Esa gente van para la calle. ¿Cuál es el plan B?
Now those displaced families are left without a sign of hope, still on a long road to recovery.
Y está muy preocupado sobre eso. Hay mucha gente, hay un movimiento en Orlando que se está haciendo en Florida como tal, para ver qué se puede hacer con estas personas que a causa de María están a punto de estar deambulantes en las calles de Orlando.
Melendez still remains hopeful.
Mi corazón espero y le pido a Dios que se resuelva algo. Nuestro país pues es un país que lucha juntos.
Struggling together for a better future, one day at a time. Shayna Ferreira, WSAV News 3.
Stay with us when preparing for the storm returns. We all want to know, will the coastal empire and low country get hit? Coming up, we take a look at what the experts are predicting this hurricane season. We'll be right back. Now, after last year's devastating Atlantic hurricane season, we want to take a look at what's in store for this year. Storm Team 3 meteorologist Lee Haywood is here with our hurricane forecast.
We're now moving into the core of hurricane season. Normally the most active time in the Atlantic Ocean, Caribbean Sea, and Gulf of Mexico is from mid-August to mid-October. This year's seasonal forecast, updated by NOAA in early August, is for near to slightly below average hurricane season. 9 to 13 named storms are forecast to develop, 4 to 7 hurricanes are expected, and 0 to 2 of which could become major hurricanes with winds of 111 miles per hour or greater. An average season produces 12 named storms, of which 6 become hurricanes, including 3 major hurricanes. Last year, by comparison, was tied for the 5th most active season on record, with 17 named storms, 10 hurricanes, and 6 major hurricanes. And in 2016, we had an above-average season with 15 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes. Several factors leading to a lower seasonal forecast include an El Nino, which is more likely to develop with enough strength to suppress storm development during the latter part of the season. Additionally, sea surface temperatures across the tropical Atlantic and Caribbean Sea have remained much cooler than average. A combination of stronger wind shear, drier air, and increased stability of the atmosphere in the region where storms typically develop will also likely further suppress hurricane development. However, it is important to remember that regardless of whether the season is active or not, it only takes one hurricane hitting our coast to make it a bad year. So you should prepare this year, like every year, with the same urgency. Hurricane season runs through November the 30th. I'm meteorologist Lee Haywood.
The newest addition to Storm Team 3 is meteorologist Alyssa Carsley. As you're about to see, she discovered her passion for weather and helping people at a very young age.
So the situation that inspired me to get into weather was Hurricane Charley in 2004. I was in Disney World, 10 years old, and I remember thinking, how can a storm shut down Disney World? Like, I mean, it's the most magical place on earth. How dare the storm shut it down? We were stuck in a hotel room overnight. We had bunk beds and we made sandwiches, but that really got me interested in weather. But it actually wasn't until I went to school for weather that I knew 110% I wanted to be a meteorologist. There's a storm just south of New Orleans that's staying pretty stationary, and we were getting some cloud cover from that. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania with all the snow, and it's cold, and it's nothing where I wanted to be for the rest of my life. So I went to the University of South Alabama in Mobile, So I was along the coast. I learned how to forecast for hurricanes and sea breeze storms, and I really loved it there because I could learn from meteorologists who have been impacted by hurricanes, because that's the #1 thing what I want to do for the rest of my career is, forecast hurricanes. I'm Stormwatch meteorologist Alyssa Carsley with a look at your web weather forecast. For today, we're a lot warmer than where we were yesterday. In fact, we're back up into the mid to upper 80s. My first job out of college was back up in the north in Oak Hill, West Virginia, forecasting snow, and it was cold, and I'm glad to be back somewhere where it's a little bit warmer. Like, I knew I loved the science part of it, but I know it's not about me. It's about those watching, the viewers at home, the community knowing what's going to happen. And that's why I care, because it's not about me. It's about those at home and those who will be impacted by whatever system is coming through.
Stay with us when Preparing for the Storm returns. We get an inside look at how experts track even the most complicated storms. We'll be right back. Now, you may have heard of the hurricane hunters, but what exactly do they do when they fly into these deadly storms? Storm Team 3 meteorologist Kyle Dennis gives us an inside look at the tools they use.
Hurricanes are some of the most destructive forces of nature. Most of us do whatever we can to get out of their way to avoid danger. But some people do the opposite, fly directly into the line of fire. They're called the hurricane hunters, and they're not just looking for a joyride. So what do they really do? While we have some amazing tools to remotely track the movement of storms from thousands of miles away, we really need a lot more information to forecast hurricanes accurately. Information we can only get when the hurricane hunters courageously fly through these deadly storms, sometimes encountering winds of 150 miles per hour. And you thought you had bad turbulence on your last flight. This is called a dropsonde. The hurricane hunters fly into and above hurricanes in P-3 turboprops and Gulfstream 4 jets, a little Savannah connection for you there. They send down about 20 of these throughout the course of their mission, which takes about 11 hours to complete. The information these send back as they parachute down to the ocean surface help increase forecast accuracy by up to 30%, which is actually a huge margin when every mile of a storm track matters. Vaisala is the largest producer of dropsondes, which contain instruments to measure wind speed, wind direction, pressure, temperature, and relative humidity on their descent. Dr. Kevin Petty, the chief science officer at Vaisala, says getting these measurements from directly inside a hurricane is critical.
And all of these parameters are key in forecasting the intensity as well as the track of a hurricane. It allows us to get a look at the inner structure of the hurricane from a standpoint of the thermodynamics as well as just the dynamics of the system.
Once that data is collected, it gets used in weather prediction models. Having a more complete picture of the storm allows the models to give us better guidance on what areas might be in harm's way. The more advanced the dropsonde, the better the information it collects, and that ultimately leads to better forecasts. Hurricane hunters risk their lives on every mission, but in doing so, they have helped save countless lives. For Storm Team 3, I'm meteorologist Kyle Dennis.
Stay with us. When Preparing for the Storm returns, even I use and rely on the Storm Team 3 weather app. It's free, and it can help to keep you safe, and I'm going to show you how to use it. News 3 on your side is more than just a slogan. We look out for you, from our newscast on air to our storm tracker out on the road, even our WSAV app right in the palm of your hand. We want to take a look now at how you can keep up with us. First, go to the App Store on your phone or tablet. Search WSAV Weather. Once you find it, hit the download button. When the app opens up, the forecast is the first thing that pops up on your screen. Click on that, and your 7-day forecast comes right up. Swipe left or right, and you'll find more useful weather information. There's the hour-by-hour forecast. Next, a video forecast from Storm Team 3 meteorologist. This is updated multiple times daily, too. And there's a link to take you to our webpage on WSAV.com. There's time saved for traffic, for live, real-time traffic updates. And finally, Spiros Live Titan Radar, where you can track storms right on your phone. Well, now that we've covered what the app offers, you need to decide your settings. First, the WSCV Weather app can be used anywhere in the world. Just click on the menu button at the bottom, go to Edit Locations, and you can select a preset location, or you can choose for the app to follow you around. This way, if you go out of town, you get updated information at your exact location. Next, select the drop-down menu and go to Settings. Now, this function is extremely important. When a severe weather warning is issued, an alert will go right to your phone. But in order for you to hear that alert tone, you must turn on the station alerts and the alert sounds to on. If you only want to get alerts for certain weather events, just click on Weather Alert Types and another menu comes up. You can turn all of these on or only a select few. It's your app, it's free, and you're free to set it up how you want. Thank you for watching Stormwatch 2018. Storm Team 3 is committed to keeping you and your loved ones informed and safe whenever severe weather strikes. I'm Storm Team 3 Chief Meteorologist Chris Allred. Keep looking up.